30 videos in 30 days, day 16. Wait, 10, 5, 6, 16. It gets more complicated the closer we get to the number 30. Today's question comes from Nylam, and she asks about sexual healing and sexual expression. Feeling one with the body and in the body, not outside of or detached from sensation. Why do I feel inhibited? I think this is a really interesting question, and while I can't answer specifically while you may feel inhibited because I don't know you and I'm not connected with you in that way, what I can speak to is perhaps what we can begin to focus on when we find ourselves in this place of feeling inhibited or feeling frustrated, especially around intimacy and sex and physical connection. So I think one of the things we can look at is that where in the body does the sexual expression or sexual energy come through us? And it comes through the sacral chakra. The sacral chakra is about 2 to 3 fingers below the belly button. It is represented traditionally by the color orange. The questions that come up for us around the sacral chakra are, what do I desire? What do I want? What is it that I want to go out there and grab or find or achieve or bring to myself to fill myself up with? So the sacral chakra represents the physical experience of sex, the sexual organs. It also rules, creation in terms of giving birth to a new human, right? The act of childbirth, but also where do I create new versions of myself? Where do I create from the flow, right? And also in a creative sense of like art, right? Sculpture, painting, drawing, dancing, moving, wherever it is. And this also deals with abundance too. So whatever it is that we do to tap into an infinite flow, the flow of energy, of the universal energy that moves through us, and how do I create with it? So if you're finding yourself inhibited sexually, and if you're finding yourself dissatisfied sexually, if you're finding yourself sort of removed from your body when it comes to physical pleasure, I think that rather than focusing on why do I feel inhibited, because what I can feel around that question is that sense of frustration, right? The heaviness of feeling blocked, of feeling frustrated, and like, why do I feel so inhibited? And I feel a lot of pressure around that question. So take a breath and perhaps begin to shift your perspective and ask the question, not why do I feel inhibited, but what do I desire? What am I really desiring in this moment? And maybe it is physical intimacy, maybe it is sexual connection, or maybe it's something altogether different that perhaps has just gotten a little bit convoluted, using my own experience and my own past of sexual compulsion and being really, really sort of sideways entangled around my ideas of intimacy and sex and creation and physical connection. Sex is easy. We can go out and find sex. A few taps on my phone, I could get sex right now. And through my own experience of sexual compulsion and finding myself always seeking and always searching for a sexual experience, but finding myself with diminishing pleasure, diminishing satisfaction, and increasing frustration, what I began to ask myself was, what is it that I really want here? And what I realized over the years of exploration was that I was really craving intimacy. I was craving emotional safety. I was craving vulnerability. Craving vulnerability. What I really wanted via the sexual experience was just to connect with another person, a man specifically in my case, through the heart, through the act of intimacy, because we can have sex without intimacy. And intimacy can be created and nurtured without sex. And so what I found through my own experience and sort of backtracking to when I became sexually active was realizing that in the time and the place where I grew up and when I grew up, where being a gay kid was not something I could be open and honest about. And yes, there was a sexual element because I was a young teenager and my hormones were going crazy and I wanted to explore and experiment with these urges and these desires. But what I never found was a way to do it safely. What I hadn't found was a way to do it authentically and honestly and from a place where I could be open and intimate and connected in a way with a person that transcended the physical. So whenever we're finding ourselves physically dissatisfied, the cue there is to dig deeper and ask, what is it that that physical act or thing represents? And for me, what I realized when I started to ask the question of not why am I sexually compulsive or why am I sexually frustrated, I reoriented that question and my searching sort of focus to ask, okay, well, what is it that I really want here? What is it that I really crave? Because if it was sex that I wanted, then I would have been satisfied a long time ago. So to your question of why do I feel inhibited, Maybe it's a matter of learning how to create a space where you can feel safe opening up. Maybe it's a matter of learning to connect with someone in a way that is emotional first, or energetic first, and then that leads to a physical connection. Because when I feel safe with someone emotionally and energetically, it is much easier than for me to open up fully sexually and connect with them, because I have allowed myself to enter a space and co-create a space where I feel safe. There's another thing that may be at play here. Oftentimes when we are going through a transformational time in our life, we have a tendency to want to pull back. Our body, our soul, our mind, our energy, our emotions are all calling us inward to say, it's sort of like the transformation of the butterfly, right? Going from caterpillar to butterfly, there is the cocoon stage, the chrysalis stage, where it is a more solitary experience, where I am sort of removing myself from the external world so that I can go through an internal transformation. And oftentimes during these periods, it is really, really crucial that we stay in our own energy field as much as possible. And when we go into a sexual experience with someone, whether it's intimate or an emotional connection or just a physical connection, there is an entanglement that happens with our energies and with our bodies that connects us in a way that if I'm in the midst of a transformation, someone else's energy in the mix might just be confusing and sort of set things off on a sort of an uneven path. And so perhaps it is just a nudge, an intuitive knowing that it's time for you to be by yourself, to go through a transformation and really figure out for yourself what sex and intimacy means. Because there's one more thing I'd like to touch on. We live in a society that right now has some pretty sideways ideas of what sex and intimacy is. We have commodified the human body. And like I said, it is so easy to go out and hook up with someone like that these days. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe for us. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's healthy for us. And by no means am I condoning going out and having a physical experience. If it works for you and that's what you want, like I did many, many times, then go for it. Just become aware of the fact that we are in the midst of redefining a lot of our ideas about sex and intimacy and what's healthy, not just physically, but what's healthy emotionally, what's healthy energetically. What am I doing when I open myself up to receive another person? Literally, the body is inside of me. What does that mean? And am I being really clear on if this is the kind of person that I want to entangle myself in? We talk about the law of entanglement with physics and how when two particles are entangled, suddenly they are connected in a way that even if they are on the other side of the planet, they still are connected. And there are experiments that prove this. They have two particles that they entangle, then they separate them. They stimulate one particle and observe the other that is not being stimulated. And guess what? The one that is not stimulated still responds in connection to the one that is, as if they were still connected. So I think that it feels to me like part of what you may be going through is just a rediscovery and an exploration of what sex is for you, what that kind of connection means. Getting rid of perhaps some old outdated ideas. There's so much guilt and shame built up around sex in our culture, especially for those of us who have a religious background. So there's a lot of bullshit that we've got going around in our heads and our minds and our bodies that it isn't even true. So maybe you're just in the midst of rediscovering and reorienting and rewriting your scripts and your narratives around sex. At the end of it all, I think a really, really powerful question to ask ourselves when it comes to desire and it comes to frustration and not feeling satisfied is, what is it that I'm really desiring here? Is it really sex, or is there something deeper that I have not found yet? And when I have that answer, then I can begin to create it for myself. Thank you for the question. I hope this helps.